Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to League Analysis. I'm Handygamer, and in this fourth video of my series about the semifinal between SKT and RNG, I will be taking a look into the third game between those two teams, and we'll try to discuss the draft and the thinking process that might have led to the decisions that the team made. Here you can see the draft priorities that I discussed in my previous videos, especially during my second video to this topic. Quick reminder, RNG still are looking for the Sejuani on the blue side as a first pick. They want to play around Uzi and close out the game throughout the mid game. The opposite side, SKT have a strong draft priority for the Galio and the Tristana, which they pick up on the red side almost every single game. And their game plan is to prolong the game such that their macro decision making and their teamfight decision making is taking effect, especially during the late game, because they have more composure apparently in terms of making the proper decisions. And that's why they try to focus on stopping Uzi. And in this third game, we are actually seeing that they are starting to play to stop Uzi by empowering Bang in order to deal with him. And this is where the Lulu for the first game in this series actually comes into play for SKT. So let's take a look at how this game unfolds. The first bans are no real surprise given how the first two games went about. RNG, I think it's almost the exact same. No, it's the very exact same bans that they used in the first game. On the opposite side, SKT swap the Janna ban for the Lulu that they banned out previously. But now, if you take the order of the draft, you can now see that their Jarvan ban has definitely something to do with either them fearing RNG locking that one in for themselves as a first pick, and Blank not feeling comfortable playing this Sejuani into it, or they're feeling that they can't really pull the Jarvan off themselves. I don't know which one of the two it is. I don't know if there's maybe a third option, a third reasoning as to why they want to remove the Jarvan. I think the Jarvan against the Galio isn't really that strong, and I think you could have left it open, and MLXG's performance on the Jarvan wasn't as insane as you might think, as you might need it as a requirement for a ban that's targeted against MLXG. So yeah, however, with now Gragas and Jarvan as 2/3 of the jungle trifecta being banned, RNG can once again revert to picking up the Sejuani as a first pick. That's something they've done in the first game as well, so no surprise here. Also, the first two picks for SKT remain still the same as during the first draft. Galio, Tristana, no surprise. Now, finally, we do see some change. RNG now, given the fact that the Janna has been taken away, and given the fact that SKT were running two aggressive supports with the Blitzcrank and the Leona in the previous games, now switch their bot lane entirely. They instead go for the Taric and the Vayne here, and I think these two are meant as a dueling combo more than outscaling and everything else, because obviously in terms of poke or harass during the laning phase, Tristana combined with any ranged support will obviously out-trade the Vayne, and the Taric himself can't really do much in terms of harassing back. However, these two make for a very strong engage combination. They can easily set up a gank. They have more than enough CC, and with Vayne's tumble, Taric also has a very easy way of landing his dazzle. So I think the combination of the two, especially given how much damage Vayne will be able to output while the enemies are either stunned or she has her Cosmic Radiance or she's invisible post 6, is actually nuts. And I think RNG now go for that composition because, well, everybody knows Uzi for not only playing the Twitch but also the Vayne to near perfection. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to go for that kind of playstyle, switch it up, try to figure out what SKT has to offer other than their all-in composition on the bot side. Now, SKT responded with the Zac. It's hard to really judge the champion by itself if you just see 2 games of it being played at Worlds. I think it was an attempt of SKT to maybe figure out another strong pick. He has a similar kit as the Jarvan has, with more tankiness and less early game power, and also less dueling potential. So I think it's also somewhat of a setup for the Galio engaging in a fight. But after seeing it lose 2 games, and me not having the time to actually revisit each and every single one of those games and watch them all over again, it's hard for me to justify that Zac priority again. But anyways, they decide to go for it. Their bans remain the same and continue to remain the same with the Shen and the Cho'Gath. So I think these 2 are bans they figured out that they should go for them. And I think RNG finally have figured out their number 4 and 5 ban as well with the Trundle and the Gnar. They want to take the counter picks away from Huni or any potential top laner that they tank top laner that they still might be running. And I think that's all pretty reasonable, and that will be proven will be a major point why SKT will not pull ahead in this series, or in this game, in this series overall. Obviously they will. But now SKT lock in the Tristana. That's fine. Pardon. It's getting too late for me here. They are looking in the Lulu to match her with the Tristana, and I think that's pretty reasonable. That's pretty fine. You obviously go for a pushing bot lane at this point. Now you just need to set up enough vision and prevent RNG from being able to roam bot side too often, and then you'll do fine. You'll simply just choke out the Vayne and deny her as many CS as you can. Obviously this relies on you having at least an even mid lane, but up until this point Faker has done rather decently with the Galio in the laning phase. Xiaohu has picked up some kills, but hasn't been like strangling Faker at any point of the game. So I think that's a pretty fair assumption to make. However, RNG realized that they might need to go bot side more often than not. Thus, they pick another soft counter to the Galio instead of the Malzahar they had been running before. They go for the Rise. With his Time Warp, he can access the bot lane more easily. They can even go for some dives and all that stuff. And also, he still has a strong dueling potential against the Galio. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. He managed to solo kill Faker, but even despite that, Rise can put a lot of pressure onto Galio, and I think just from pure laning perspective and what you want to try to achieve with the lanes, I think I prefer the Rise over the Malzahar. Also, you have to keep in mind that the Tristana will be rather safe against the Malzahar later on in the game, especially with now the Lulu adding additional health pool to the Tristana, so you can't really go for the Nether Grasp on either player except for Wolf, because there will always be the wild growth available to just sustain them up, and also at the same time will be exposed and under threat. So yeah, that's that. A last pick for RNG is another very strong pick for them. It's the Maokai. It really fits Letme's playstyle. It's just right in his wheelhouse, and he can use the Maokai pretty decently with the teleport to set up bot lane dives, and that's I think what RNG will be looking to go for during this game. They have the Taric, who is just a very strong team fighter in burst situations where you go for burst combination on an enemy team who might throw burst back at you, because with Sejuani, with Maokai's TP, you are the one that is engaging these fights, that is choosing the timing of the engagements, and thus you will be the one being able to react most efficiently with the Taric, and you have the Vayne, you have the Sejuani to properly position the Dazzle for the lockdown on enemy carries. Last pick of the draft is the Camille for Huni on the top side. Again, he's been playing it in the second game, but against the Gnar, not against the Maokai. And the problem that Camille will be facing against Maokai is, prior to finishing her 294s and possibly even after that, she won't be having any pressure in her lane, because Maokai with his passive can simply sustain against her and use his high base damage to trade pretty decently against her. So Huni doesn't get as much of a pressure matchup as he did in the second game, despite having the same champion again. And I think if you now, as a conclusion, look at the team comps overall, I think that RNG have somewhat of an easier time executing their team composition, but it really comes down to the execution. It comes down to whether they are able to collapse on the bot side efficiently or not, if they are able to unlock Rise in the mid lane or not, because as I said, in terms of mentality, they feel pressured to play the game for the mid game, not for the late game, even though they still have a very strong late game team composition here. Because in the later stages of the game, when the Camille finally is able to deal with the Maokai, then SKT will be able to play their macro game, their map pressure game, and simply try to avoid any potential team fights that RNG might be looking for, and only contest objectives if it's really necessary. So yeah, I think RNG come out ahead with the somewhat easier to execute team composition. Again, for me, the Zac remains a huge question mark. I can't really judge what he has to offer that Jarvan doesn't have, or that makes it somewhat of a better pick for Blank in this scenario. But by picking the Zac, they are again sacrificing a lot of their early game potential. They will have to wait for him to scale up, reach level 5, 6, 7 to actually be able to impact the lanes in any meaningful way, or at least have easy access to the lanes and engage with his Elastic Slingshot as we know it from a couple of screens away. And well, obviously SKT do have a strong bot lane in terms of just lane versus lane, nobody moving and everybody staying where they start out with. SKT will win the bot side, but Lulu herself can't reset engagements the way that Janna can. So if you are getting trapped on the bot side, there is no way that Lulu will be able to get out. Even if Tristana makes it out with a rocket jump, Lulu will always be trapped there. That means you will always be a player down with no possibility of resetting the fight, and thus I think if you consider that Huni takes too long to go online, it's easier for RNG to establish their win conditions, even though it requires them to out macro SKT in a certain sense during the early stages of the game through the bot lane collapses. So yeah, that's it for my fourth video. Thanks for watching. If you want to have a discussion, just leave a comment or hit me up on Twitter, and I'll be glad to explain the thought process behind some of the aspects that I mentioned here. So that's it. See you guys in the next video.